The smell of fresh bread wasn't the first thing that struck me as odd. It was the silence. No honking horns, no distant chatter, not even the rhythmic lap of water against the gondola mooring outside my window. Venice, usually a symphony of urban chaos, was eerily still. I sat up in bed, the sheets tangled around my legs. My phone, usually nestled on the nightstand, was gone. Panic clawed at my throat as I remembered leaving it plugged in downstairs. Throwing on a robe, I raced down the creaky wooden stairs, the scent of warm bread intensifying with each step. There, in the heart of my tiny kitchen, stood a loaf of crusty bread cooling on a rack. Beside it, a pot of strong coffee bubbled on the stove. But the kitchen was empty. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Marco?" I called out, my voice echoing off the worn stone walls. No answer. Marco, the jovial owner of the little bakery below my apartment, always left me a warm loaf and a cup of coffee on mornings when I had an early flight to catch. This wasn't one of those mornings. Today, I was supposed to be exploring the hidden canals with a group tour. Confused and increasingly worried, I grabbed my phone charger and raced back upstairs. Plugging it in, a wave of relief washed over me as the screen flickered to life. But the relief was short-lived. No signal. No bars. Nothing. Frantic, I tried the Wi-Fi, nothing. It was like the entire world had gone offline. Desperate for answers, I threw on some clothes and stepped out onto the balcony. The sight that greeted me sent a fresh wave of terror crashing over me. The canals, usually teeming with gondolas and tourists, were deserted. Not a single boat bobbed on the glassy surface. The silence was deafening. I cupped my hands around my mouth and called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" My voice hung heavy in the air, unanswered. Panic clambered up my throat, threatening to choke me. Was there some kind of citywide evacuation? An accident? A power outage that somehow managed to knock out my phone's signal too? Driven by a desperate need to know what was going on, I grabbed my purse and raced out the door. The narrow streets of Venice were eerily empty. Shops with their colorful displays stood abandoned, their doors hanging open. A child's red ball lay forgotten in the middle of a deserted piazza. My breath came in ragged gasps as I hurried towards the main square, Piazza San Marco. The pigeons, usually a persistent nuisance, were gone. The iconic basilica stood silent and imposing in the morning sun. I called out again, my voice cracking with fear, but there was no response. Hours bled into one another as I wandered the deserted city. I found a half-eaten breakfast in a cafe, a newspaper fluttering in the breeze outside a shop, a dog leash dangling limply from a post. Every sign pointed towards a sudden, unexplained disappearance. Exhaustion and despair finally forced me to seek refuge in my apartment. Curling up on the couch, I ate the cold bread and drank the lukewarm coffee, the silence pressing down on me like a physical weight. As the day wore on, an unsettling realization dawned. The city wasn't just deserted, it was eerily undisturbed. No overturned furniture, no broken windows, no signs of struggle. It was as if everyone, everything, had simply vanished into thin air. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the canals, a new fear took root in my chest. Maybe I wasn't alone. Maybe something unseen, was responsible for the disappearance. The following days were a blur of exploration and desperate hope. I raided abandoned grocery stores for food, scavenged for batteries to power a dusty old radio I found, all in vain. The silence continued, unbroken. One morning, while scouring a library for answers, a glint of metal caught my eye. Nestled amongst a stack of books was a small, silver locket. Inside, a faded photograph, a young couple, arms wrapped around each other, smiling brightly. The inscription on the back read simply, "Semper Insieme, always together." Tears welled up in my eyes. It was a tangible reminder of the life that had once filled this city. Holding the locket close, I vowed to find out what happened, to find some sign of life, some explanation. Days turned into weeks, then months. The initial terror gave way to a dull ache of loneliness. I learned to navigate the canals by myself, scavenging for supplies, tending to a small rooftop garden I created. But the silence remained my constant companion. Then, one day, something changed. A soft rustling came from the direction of the canals. My heart lurched, a jolt of adrenaline shooting through me after months of numb routine. Could it be? Someone? Something? Cautiously, I crept towards the window overlooking the water. My breath hitched in my throat. A lone gondola drifted down the canal, its black hull gliding silently over the glassy surface. But it wasn't empty. A figure sat in the stern, its back turned to me. It was cloaked in a long, dark robe, the hood pulled low, obscuring any features. The rhythmic creak of the oars against the oarlocks was the only sound that broke the silence. For a moment, I stood frozen, a silent scream trapped in my throat. Then, a primal urge to reach out, to connect with another living being, overwhelmed me. "Hello!" I shouted, my voice hoarse from disuse. The figure in the gondola didn't move. It continued down the canal, the rhythmic creaking growing fainter until it faded into the distance. Was it real? A figment of my lonely imagination? Hope battled with a cold dread in my gut. Either way, it was a change. A break in the oppressive silence. The next few days were filled with a nervous anticipation. Every rustle of wind, every creak of the old building, sent shivers down my spine. And then, another sound, a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from the sealed attic door at the top of the stairs. My breath caught in my throat. The attic had always been off limits, a dusty, cobweb-filled space Marco refused to touch. But now, the tapping seemed to beckon me, a morbid curiosity warring with a deep-seated fear. Finally, unable to resist any longer, I grabbed a heavy candlestick from the kitchen and climbed the creaky steps to the attic door. Taking a deep breath, I braced myself and slammed the candlestick into the lock. The old wood splintered with a satisfying crack, and the door creaked open. A wave of stale, dusty air washed over me. The attic was a dimly lit space filled with cobwebs and forgotten furniture. The tapping sound seemed louder now, echoing off the dusty floorboards. Following the sound, I cautiously made my way through the cluttered room. The tapping led me to a large, ornately carved chest pushed into a corner. Cobwebs draped over it like a ghostly shroud. With trembling hands, I cleared the webs and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in layers of moth-eaten fabric, lay a collection of small, silver lockets, identical to the one I found in the library. Panic surged through me. Each locket held a faded photograph, a smiling couple, a group of friends, a family portrait. They were all different, yet all the same, captured moments of a life that was no more. And then I saw it, tucked beneath the lockets, a single sheet of paper, yellowed with age. Unfolding it with shaking hands, my heart lurched into my throat. It was a newspaper clipping, the headline screaming, "Rare, unknown pathogen sweeps through Venice, city under quarantine." The date on the clipping was just 2 weeks before I arrived in Venice. The article spoke of a highly contagious disease with flu-like symptoms, but with a terrifying twist: rapid memory loss and a descent into a vegetative state. The quarantine had been enacted to prevent further spread. The tapping sound suddenly stopped. A cold realization washed over me. The figure in the gondola. It wasn't a monster, a harbinger of doom. It was another survivor, another lonely soul trapped in a city of the living dead. And the tapping? Maybe a desperate plea for connection, just like my own cry across the empty canals. The silence that had been my constant companion for months suddenly felt different. It wasn't an empty void anymore. It was a canvas painted with the echoes of a lost city, a chilling reminder of the unseen threat that lurked within its walls. But in that silence, there was also a flicker of hope. I wasn't truly alone. There was another soul out there, adrift in this ghost town. And maybe, just maybe, together we could find a way to survive. The weight of the newspaper clipping felt heavy in my hand, the stark reality sinking in. My initial fear of the unknown morphed into a chilling understanding. Venice wasn't deserted, it was a city of the infected, their minds slowly fading, their bodies left on autopilot. The tapping from the attic floor recommenced, a frantic rhythm now, pulling me from my thoughts. A desperate plea for contact, I realized, mirroring the primal urge I felt after seeing the gondolier. "LD, I connect with someone whose mind was slipping away?" The question gnawed at me for days. I raided the abandoned library again, scouring medical journals for any information on the mysterious disease. There were references to memory loss, but no cure, no hope. Frustration clawed at me. Then, a memory surfaced, a conversation with Marco about a local tradition. Every year, on a specific night, the canals of Venice would be lit up with thousands of floating candles, a festival of light called Festa del Mare. A spark ignited in my mind. Maybe, just maybe, it could be a beacon, a way to pierce through the fog of the infected's fading memories. A desperate hope, but it was all I had. The next few days were a frenzy of activity. I raided abandoned shops for candles, scavenging every last one I could find. Back at my apartment, I melted the wax down in makeshift containers, fueled by a feverish determination. The chosen night arrived, the full moon casting an ethereal glow over the silent city. One by one, I lit the candles, placing them in makeshift boats fashioned from empty food containers. A flotilla of flickering flames, a fragile bridge of light stretching across the canals. Standing on my balcony, I released the boats, watching them drift away, carrying my message of hope into the inky darkness. The silence remained unbroken, but this time, it didn't feel oppressive. It felt filled with anticipation. Hours ticked by, and just as despair threatened to engulf me again, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A lone gondola emerged from the labyrinth of canals, its dark silhouette stark against the moonlit water. But this time, the figure in the stern wasn't alone. Several shadowy forms stood beside it, their faces hidden in the darkness. They moved with a jerky, uncoordinated gait, their forms swaying precariously. As the gondola drifted closer, the figure in the stern raised a hand, a single flickering candle clutched in its grasp. A single tear rolled down my cheek, a mixture of relief and sorrow. They had seen my message. They weren't truly gone. The gondola continued its slow journey down the canal, the figures mirroring my gesture, raising their flickering candles in a silent salute. A connection forged not through words, but through the universal language of light and hope. The future remained uncertain. Venice, once a bustling city, was now a monument to a lost past. But in the flickering flames of those candles, I saw a glimmer of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, together, the infected and the lone survivor, we could find a way to rebuild, to create a new normal in this city of the living dead.